This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an England Independent Supporters podcast. So here we are again, at a time when generally pre-season would pretty much be over and we'd be getting ready for the season to commence. Lush green pitches in the sunshine, meeting up with friends after a 3-month break, sharing holiday stories together. The Charity Shield, the traditional curtain raiser to the season, textbook cliche there, would have been played, but this time it's going to be played on the 29th of August, with the Premier League season beginning on the 12th of September. As squeezed in between are our Nations League games against Iceland and Denmark on the 5th and 8th respectively. Well, I should probably correct myself there, as I'm clearly showing my age calling it the Charity Shield, as of course it is the Community Shield, I'm sure sponsored by someone. For those that are perhaps not so familiar with English football, and I know there are a few listeners from abroad, the Community Shield is a trophy contested by the English Premier League winners and the FA Cup winners. It's played at Wembley. So this year, Arsenal will face Liverpool. A match-up I remember happening back in 1989. Whether it happened before that, not quite sure, but I'm pretty confident it hasn't happened any time recently. Whilst there is a trophy at stake, and it's more a shield rather than a trophy. Is it a hexagon, octagon? It's got 8 sides. I think it's basically an 8-sided silver shield on a wooden background. It's not really something to crow about, as basically it's still a friendly game. But it is, as they say, the curtain raiser. Now, thank you for all the feedback on the recent episode where we spoke with Daniel Mousson about his first England game, which was against Tunisia back in 1998 in the World Cup. A lively affair, that one. If you've not heard it yet, it's still in all the usual places. It is a good listen. And as I've said before, it's good to get some older memories from supporters. And if you'd like to share yours, please do drop me a line. I've still got a few in the can, which I'll put out at some stage soon. But hopefully we'll have our preview episode for Iceland and Denmark coming very soon. Hooray, we can finally get around to doing one of those ones again. In the meantime, what does this episode hold for you? Well, here is a little clue.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be outstanding for the national anthems. Half-time score, England 5, Montenegro 0.
It's an interesting chat, and it's coming up very soon. But what's happened international-wise since we last spoke? Frankly, not a great deal. The transfer window is open, and we'll see if any England players make a move over the next few weeks. Doesn't look like Jadon Sancho made that move to Manchester United since we last spoke. But the next squad should be revealed within the next couple of weeks. And as I mentioned on Twitter, barring Gareth's first ever squad and his World Cup squad, this could well be one of his hardest and most interesting ones to compile. And as again you may have seen on Twitter, I've been tweeting the days since England last played a countdown. Or is it a count up? Yeah, we're counting up the days, aren't we? But when we face Iceland, it'll be nigh on 10 months since that Kosovo win in Pristina. And John Stones, Fabian Delph, Joe Gomez, well, they were all in that squad for Montenegro and Kosovo. Now, will we see the likes of Jack Grealish, Mason Greenwood, Dean Henderson, Danny Ings? Well, they've all done well in this recent period, and Gareth Southgate has previously gone on record saying he'll only pick on performances. So we'll see. And UEFA have still not given any definitive news on whether supporters will be allowed in stadiums for the upcoming Nations League games. Although, as I think I mentioned on a previous episode, the England Supporters Club are working along the lines that these will be behind closed doors. Obviously, the Champions League and Europa League are going ahead fan-free, but at the moment in Iceland, their national league has been postponed due to a corona spike. And at the moment, with regards to our game against Denmark, which is shortly afterwards, according to UK government advice, a stay of 6 days is required. And I quote from the government website, "The UK is an open country. This means that you can enter Denmark without having to go into a 2-week quarantine if you are arriving into Denmark from the UK. If you enter as a tourist, you need to document a holiday stay for at least 6 nights. It could be a stay in a rented summer house, a campsite, at a hotel, or a private home, or a privately let summer house." Obviously, this can change at the drop of a hat, but it does scupper my plan of kipping at the airport after the game. And let me just cover my own back and say these are the guidelines I'm working to. Please make sure that you do your own research as to what you do. Please, I don't want to be held responsible for anything that you may do. If you are planning on going to either Iceland or Denmark, Reykjavik or Copenhagen, I will keep my fingers crossed for you. But frankly, I can't see it being too easy. Okay, time to move on to this episode's chat. But did that little clue help you? Now, my guest today is someone that I'm sure many England supporters will recognise. Well, his voice at least. As I'd like to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, Kris Temple, who is the current Wembley Stadium announcer for all England home games and also many other showpiece events, FA Cup finals, playoffs, etc. Kris, hello.
Hi, Russell. Thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Wembley Stadium announcer, eh? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice one on the CV, isn't it? It's a nice one to look at, and it's an amazing one to, as you can imagine, to carry out as well. How it came about? Well, basically, I've done quite a few events in quite a few sports going back through sort of probably 10 years or so. I reckon I've been on the announcing beat, if you like, okay. And a bit longer in my sort of my more regular career as a broadcaster. And I work with somebody called Emma Saunders, who actually is now my sort of co-presenter at Wembley for England and FA games as well. And they were just having a little bit of a reshuffle at Wembley and just moving a few people around and trying a few different things. This is in the summer of 2018, immediately prior to England going off to Russia for the World Cup. Okay. So they tried a few different people and tried a few different combinations, and myself and Emma had a go together, and I tried with a couple of other people as well. And yeah, we must have done okay, because what will be 2.5 years later, and we're sort of still in position. It's sort of our job now, if you like. So yeah, it was almost like a live trial process, if you like. Really, it's now a massive privilege, as you can imagine.
I bet. So what was that first game at Wembley for you?
So it was a Nigeria friendly.
Yep.
England won by 2-1. Actually, I'll be totally honest with you, Russell. I was trying to think who my first England goal announcement had been of my sort of Wembley Stadium announcing career, and I had to look it up. Right. Because I should know, and I mean I've commentated on that many goals. I think it's 28 goals in something like 7 or 8 England internationals. So they've obviously had a little bit of a spell of scoring 5s and 7s and things. But it was actually Gary Cahill. Who scored the first goal in that Nigeria 2-1 win. So I'm not sure I would have sat here all day and got that if I'd tried to guess. So,
were you nervous then for that first one?
Yeah, I would say yes, hugely. I mean, not only sort of nervous about I've done stuff in big stadia before, but Wembley's obviously the biggest one I've ever done. But just the fact it was England, and just the fact you're sat right there, literally behind the benches, pitch side, and of course at Wembley, as well as doing the sort of in-game announcing, we also do the big screen presentation, the sort of hour or so before kick-off and everything as well. So there was a few sort of guests, the likes of Sir Geoff Hurst and Peter Shilton and other people that we've interviewed sort of pitch side before the game. So as much as the actual in-game announcements keep you right on edge and making sure you get them right, there's a lot of sort of guests that will slightly overawe you as well a little bit, that you haven't really interviewed anybody of their sort of caliber before, particularly live in a massive stadium. So yeah, every element of it, I would say, for that first game was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I can well imagine. I think is it your Twitter page or your banner thing that you're standing next to. Is it Usain Bolt as well?
Yes, yeah, he was. I can't remember which international that was, but he was a halftime guest. He was just happened to be in the area doing something, and yeah, again, when they say right halftime, and it was a halftime relay where the kids all run around or someone runs around with a ball, and they got Usain Bolt out as the special guest for that. So, I mean, when it comes to relay guests, that's pretty much the top of the pile, isn't it? So
yes,
yeah, and he's a big man, but he's a funny man. He loves his football, as we know. So he was well up for it.
I was thinking about your job, and it kind of struck me that you're you're an integral part of the match day experience for people who go to the games. Perhaps maybe underappreciated, because you're basically the person who explains things to us, be it as you say, the introductions, there's the lineups, the half times, subs, goals, as you say, added time, which always gets a cheer or a groan.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that without you, we'd not really have a great deal of a clue what's going on, especially those at the back row, I guess, at the top tier at Wembley. You're kind of like our TV commentator, aren't you?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that, because I mean, it's obviously the way the world's turned at the moment, and having stadia without fans. Actually, a lot of events are actually sort of doing away with announcers, because there's no one. I get tweets, from people saying, "Why is there an announcer at Wembley for the FA Cup final when there's no one there?" Well, of course, part of the role of being an announcer is not just necessarily for the fans. It's also part of the occasion, as you say, and the fact that there are ceremonial bits that need to be handled. For example, the cup final or England games, the national anthem needs to be cued. It doesn't just play itself. All those. I don't press play on the music, but the scripting and everything else. Guests that need to be introduced. Things like VAR, of course, is an extra role for an announcer these days. But I think a lot of England fans listening to this would probably say they've never noticed me, or that they just don't really notice what goes on the big screen, because they have their ritual of meeting their certain friends at a certain point for the pre-match drinks or chat or have a bet or whatever it is that people do before the game. And they probably have a glance up, or they probably listen to, the team lineups or other things that go on. But I think unless it's one of those things, if you do a good job, that's when you often don't get noticed. It's like refereeing, isn't it? If you stumble or stutter or get something wrong, that's when people will notice you. So that's in a way why, obviously you want to get everything right anyway, but even more so that you can almost go under the radar sometimes. And that's probably sometimes as an announcer how it should probably be. But there are so many elements to it, and it's not just standing there shouting. There's ways to sort of try and manage an atmosphere. There's ways to try and create an atmosphere. Obviously, when England score, that's the big high. You have to be a balancing act, because there are obviously the FA and Wembley and everything pride themselves on welcoming the opposition countries and their fans to matches. So you have to treat them with respect. So there's lots of different elements rather than literally just being the shouty man with the microphone.
No, I think, as I say, like if you weren't there, then I think we would certainly notice it. But the job you do, I think, is great. And you mentioned the FA Cup final there, and I did see. I think it was on your Twitter feed, where obviously Arsenal had the issue with lifting the cup, and you've done really well to sort of keep that momentum going there, despite them dropping it.
Well, to give you a bit of an insight, Russell, into that, I mean, that's obviously those moments, again, with an occasion like that with no fans, there are actually very few parts of their overall sort of what you'd call the presentation of the game. So things like the national anthem, things like Abide With Me on the Roof, and all those little bits sort of make up the presentation. And actually one of those parts of it is the trophy lift as an element, if you like. So the building the stage, where the stage is going to be. And of course, when you time your announcements is also part of it as well, because you want to try and hit the team lifting the trophy. So you always have to start a fraction of a second early with ladies and gentlemen, it's time to celebrate your, whatever it is, the team, the competition, because you want to have got that sentence out and have a little bit of a beat to breathe before they lift the trophy and you say the team name. And of course, it was all going well. And if you want to watch this video, it's on my Twitter at Kris Temple, but just to see what we're talking about. But, it was all going well. And Aubameyang takes the trophy in front of his teammates, and then the bottom drops off it, of course. And as everyone saw, there's a big gap. But luckily, as a sort of presentation team, no one pressed the go on the fireworks. Nobody pressed go on the streamers, and I managed to catch my words because luckily I had a couple of words still to say. So we managed to catch the situation, because the last thing you wanted to do was peak too early. Yeah. And I have to say, in the Sky Bet Championship playoff final, which was a few days later between Fulham and Brentford, I have to say we probably got that one spot on. I was quite nervous about that one, thinking we can't have 2 in 4 days where something goes wrong. So, yeah, again, it's one of those where probably, people wouldn't notice our part in it. And I'm grateful that you took the time to watch the video and said that we managed to do all right with it.
No, this is very good, very good. Whereabouts do you present from or announce from?
Yeah, that's one of the things that when I first did it and they said, this is going to be your position, this is where you're based during the game. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought I'd be like high up at the back of the, the second tier or something. So we are right down pitch side. There's a little, if you ever notice, and you'll look at this next time you're at Wembley, there are two sort of clear plastic desks behind the benches, sort of a few rows back behind the substitutes and things. And that is basically the sort of production desk. So that is where the music is played from. That is where the show producer sits. And that is where I sit as well, with the microphone during the game. And obviously during the pre-match and half-time and anything else, we're sort of roaming up and down in and around the technical area. I do my first piece walking out of the tunnel, which is always a nice piece to do every week. And sometimes you're right in the middle of the players who are warming up or coming out to look at the pitch or all sorts. So actually things can be a little bit unpredictable. You could be talking about Harry Kane and all of a sudden he's there next to you, completely sort of unscripted. So yeah, we're right pitch side, and the announcing position is at pitch level, which actually isn't brilliant because you're looking, if you've ever watched a game from the front row, it's not a great angle to watch a game from because you're looking through people. You can't really get a perspective of distances. And of course, if a corner comes in and there's a massive schmozzle of players heading the ball into the net, it's very difficult with the naked eye from pitch level to see who's got the touch. So obviously we have monitors in front of us as well. But yeah, probably ideally we'd like to be a little bit further back, but we are right down pitch side.
So when you say you've got the monitors there, but say if there's a substitution being made or multiple substitutions, has someone sort of given you a list of what's going to happen or are you just taking it from what you can visually see or off the screen?
It's a little bit of all of those. So often during a game, obviously the live TV broadcast will have a floor manager. You'll often spot him or her walking around the sort of technical area with an earpiece in, talking to the fourth official. He's the one or she's the one who stands on the touchline and gives the signal that the match can kick off, for example. Now, they are in the ear of the fourth official. They'll usually get a heads up as to what subs are coming. We can obviously see who's coming on usually, but it's often the player coming off that's the one. And also we factor in here that the guys doing the graphics on the big screen, all the other things, commentators, Sky Sports graphics people, ITV graphics people, they also are trying to get the heads up a little bit before it happens so they can get everything ready, not just us as announcers. So yeah, there's a Sky floor manager who will radio that through. And we also have our own event floor manager who is there as a sort of a second pair of eyes and ears. And they will usually tell us, okay, the substitution is England 16 for 10. But as you say, when it gets to 2 or 3 subs or in friendly matches, maybe both teams making 3 subs at the same time, in that situation, you also don't know what order they're going to happen in. So there's quite a lot in that case of reacting live off the board when the fourth official holds it up. And quickly, I have a little system with what I write down on my team sheet to make sure I try not to make any mistakes. But sometimes it is a little bit on the hoof, and that's where you've just got to take your time, not rush it. There's not a time limit to get those out. Ideally, you want to be saying the player's name off, and then about 3 or 4 steps before they get to the edge of the pitch, that's when you say the player coming on, so that as soon as they take their step or 2 onto the pitch, that's when you name them. And if they're worthy of getting a cheer from the crowd, then hopefully they do.
I mean, one thing with the names, as I'm sure you're well aware that I'm probably going to ask, is the pronunciation of them. I mean, we all know how to pronounce like your Harry Kane and Dele Alli and various England players, but when it comes to some opposition players who perhaps aren't regularly seen in the Premier League or on high-profile leagues that we may watch on the telly, how do you get around those?
Well, the fundamental of that for me, Russell, is that I feel it's a respect to those players to make the effort to get their name right. Because you can look at a team sheet and do it on the fly and have a go, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. That isn't my style. My style is to put in the research. So before match day, I will, as a first port of call, simply YouTube a lot of players, look for interviews in their native language, where they might say their own name or a reporter might say their own name. If there's nothing that I can find with something accurate, then often I will seek out a journalist from that country. But it's happened. I mean, Montenegro was a prime example, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Kosovo as well recently. I mean, all the teams that England have played actually recently, I would say I've had a few names in there that have been a bit of a mouthful. So yeah, I would, and often what I do is get them to record me a voice note with their way of saying it and send it over so I can practice it. Worst case scenario would be if you haven't managed to do any of that before you get to the ground or the stadium on the night, search out a member of the media team from that country or an English-speaking member of their coaching staff. Or actually, we do often have a native announcer of that language as well for health and safety messages that might need to be got out in the stadium that need to be said in native tongue. So often we will have someone like that there. The only problem with that is that sometimes they're not football people. I mean, it's, there's not a huge plethora of Montenegrin announcers knocking around in North London, with the greatest respect, there isn't. So, their football knowledge might not be up to a lot. They might not have heard of the players. So, yeah, it's a combination of all of those things. But the ultimate for me is let's make sure we take the trouble, because it will be, for a lot of people coming to Wembley as well, the biggest game they'll play, or a very, very notable game. They might play at Wembley only once in their career. Let's take the trouble. And I've done this with Wickham and Exeter and Northampton, all these teams that have just been in the playoffs as well. Even though there's no fans, let's make sure we do them the courtesy of getting their name right.
Yeah, no, fair play. It took me back to, I remember going to San Marino away, and there was, I probably wouldn't have remembered it had it not have been for this one particular player, but the PA announcer there, the stadium announcer, actually announced the surnames before the Christian names, which was all going along. And I think initially it was like, oh, okay, he's doing it like that, until he got to Ashley Young, when he called him Young Ashley.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah. Young Ashley. Yeah, I mean, again, it's quite easily done probably in a lot of languages where you're not so familiar, but you'd like to think with England that most people would probably know which way around some of the names were. But anyway, Young Ashley, yeah, he won't shake that one off.
No. So how does your typical day at Wembley go?
So we have an early call time. So I would say we are probably in the ground for, let's say it's a 7:45 kickoff. We would be in the ground for about 2:00 or so. There's a sort of a production meeting is the first thing that we do. And the sound technicians and everybody have been in earlier than that, rigging up all the equipment, obviously. There's obviously a permanent PA system, but in terms of the sound deck that plays all the music and everything, that's brought in every game by an outside contractor. So we'll have a production meeting at sort of 4 to 5 hours before kickoff, with the FA staff and our event staff, and members of the TV production team, sometimes members of the choir or the military who might be doing a ceremony or something, just to go through every single element of the event presentation, because as well as for those in the stadium, a lot of the event presentation is also coordinated with the global broadcast as well. So the national anthem and, Emily Sandé on the roof singing Abide With Me, all of that kind of stuff is coordinated with TV. So it might be on the big screen in the stadium, but obviously we're doing it to very specific timings. And obviously I'm usually in those moments getting things counted down in my ear. So while, you're hearing me in the stadium thinking, oh, he's just doing this, whatever time he wants. Actually, I'm usually being counted down to meet some sort of TV junction as well. So yeah, we'll have that meeting. And then once the meeting's done and we've done a few rehearsals with sort of looking at positions that we'll stand to do interviews, we might run through my little intro, which is where I walk out of the tunnel, just to see, how many words I've got to get to a certain point by the dugouts, or finding a good angle to do things so we make sure we haven't got the big screen in the background. All these kind of things. We'll run through every single position, and obviously to test things like the camera signal and the mic signal in certain parts of the stadium as well. And then once we've done that, we're probably still 3 hours away from kickoff, I would say. We do get a bit of downtime then, and that's when I would check pronunciations, just write a few questions for interviewees, just make sure I've got all that in my head, and just generally get your head around the game. And then we have a little green room downstairs, like a production office, where we can get changed into if we're on screen or on the big screen. And then we're sort of doors open at whatever time, an hour and a half before kickoff. And then I think pretty much an hour and 5 minutes before kickoff, that's when we're live. So from then on, it is into sort of full show mode. So and then after the game, it's pretty much, we do a flash interview on the pitch, which my colleague Emma normally does. And then that's us done usually. So unless there's a trophy to be handed out or anything else like that, England games, for example, normally are pretty much done, and we can be out of the building within 15 minutes of the final whistle normally. So,
oh wow, you're in the throng with all of us.
Well, I have to say, Russell, a couple of times I've had places I've needed to get to, like I've had trains I've needed to catch to get to an event the next day, and trying to get through the tube queue into Wembley Park, or hearing it over to Wembley Central, or whatever it does. I am right in the middle of it. Unfortunately, there's no access all areas pass to get you in the tube any quicker or anything like that. I am literally, as soon as I come out the stadium, I'm battling with everybody else.
I know a shortcut next time, so come find me. We've got a little shortcut.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
In the past, I've heard some cracking errors, and other than the the young Ashley one, which kind of amused me. But there was a famous one, I think in 1987. It was the League Cup semi-final between Tottenham and Arsenal, and it was a two-legged semi-final. And I believe that at half-time of the game, the Tottenham stadium announcer basically told the Tottenham fans how to go about buying tickets for the final. And this was heard through the Arsenal dressing room and gave them all the motivation that they needed to go out and win that, and then subsequently went on to win the trophy that year. and there was another one that, I don't know if I should really say this one, but I guess it was one of your predecessors.
Right.
But I think it was in 2008 when we didn't qualify for the Euros then. I seem to remember the stadium announcer said after we'd beaten, I can't remember who it was we'd beaten, but he basically said, you can now go book your tickets for Austria and Switzerland. And we then went on to lose to Russia and Croatia.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, you are quite sort of high profile, and you've got to sort of make sure you're saying the right things, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, all those kind. I mean, I would say that those kind of things. I mean, I would try and steer clear of anything that gets a bit too sort of, parochial, if you like. And I mean, you'd probably expect it more at maybe at a club where you're very much sort of, you're very one-sided. You think of a club PA announcer. Your colours are nailed to the mast. Doing England at Wembley, of course, we are England slanted. Absolutely, we are. And again, it's a different type of role when you do the FA Cup semi-finals or final, because there you're suddenly neutral, and you have to treat every goal as if it's exactly the same as the other team scoring. But you're right in terms of you are exposed, because once you've said something, you can't catch it back and delete it and edit it, because in a stadium it is live. Doing TV or doing a podcast like this or anything else, if you say something, you either stumble or get it wrong or say something you legally shouldn't have done, you can always edit it out. But unfortunately, live, whether it be on TV or whatever, or particularly in a stadium where there's 90,000 people sat there in front of you about to react if you get something wrong, I think that's the biggest sort of live pressure of all, is that all the people are there. And you are the one that, again, it comes back to, if somebody in the production team, and this hasn't happened, but if someone in the production team feeds you a dud bit of information, maybe something like saying England have qualified when they haven't or whatever, if you say that on the mic, the only person that's the fall guy is you, not the person that has delivered you that information wrongly. So that's why I always like to have my own information. I always like to be fully across everything, so that the only person, if there is a mistake to be made, that can be blamed is me. But luckily, touching wood as I say this, we haven't had that situation yet, because I'd always be erring on the side of caution if there wasn't something. And again, it goes back to goal scorers. There'll be a time sometimes when you're not quite sure who scored. And rather than taking a flyer and getting it wrong, that's where you just take a moment, watch a couple of replays, try and get a second opinion from people in the production team, and until you're absolutely sure, don't say anything. I think there was an unfortunate moment with Raheem Sterling's hat-trick goal. I can't remember if it was the Czech Republic or was it the Bulgaria game?
Bulgaria, I think, wasn't it?
The Bulgaria one. The third one looked like it was an own goal. And so, of course, Sterling's moment is hat-trick moment, but because the initial impression was it was an own goal, we don't announce own goals. So we probably could have announced it for Sterling, and no one really would have argued. But at the time, we weren't quite sure, and we didn't want to give Sterling a hat-trick if it was clearly an own goal. So that's the kind of thing where you just take a moment to make sure there's not going to be any clangers. You'd rather say nothing than say something wrong.
Yeah. Well, I hope I haven't jinxed anything for you going forward. Well, I mean, you're not just the voice of Wembley, are you? Because you've announced other high-profile events too, be it sticking with football, the World Cup in Russia and the Euros of a few years back, but also cricket, athletics, rugby, and I believe, weren't you prepared to go to the Olympics this year?
Yeah, I mean, this summer I should have been doing the Euros. So as it stands now, I'm still in position. I'll be doing the games at Wembley for Euro 2020, including the semis and the final, which is, and I'm the only one. There's only one announcer for those games, so that's a huge honour. And obviously, it was a big blow when that was knocked back. Olympics, as you say, I should be in Tokyo right now as we're recording this, working on athletics as well. I've been lucky in that when I was growing up, I was sort of across a few sports. I had athletics sort of in my family. My dad was an athletics journalist. Football and cricket were my two sports really growing up. Rugby I got more into as I got older. And there are good opportunities if you're multi-talented, that sounds so big-headed. If you're multi-sort of interested, if you like, multi-skilled, you know what I mean?
Yes.
There are opportunities, and I've been lucky enough to do, as you say, I did Kazan at the World Cup in Russia, which obviously if England and Belgium had just played that game a bit more competitively, I would have had England against Brazil in my stadium in Kazan at the World Cup. But as it turned out, obviously it was Brazil against Belgium in the quarterfinals, which Belgium went on to win. So that missed my opportunity to have England at the World Cup. But no, I did Argentina, France, Brazil, Portugal. So I saw all the top teams in my stadium, which was announcing Messi and Ronaldo and all the Mbappe and all these other players was amazing. Olympics, I did Rio. I did the rugby sevens, which was the first time that rugby sevens obviously been in the Olympics for many, many years. So that was, again, a real honour. I did the Rugby World Cup in England in 2015. Cricket World Cup last year. I've done a couple of sort of global cricket tournaments as well. And I work for the ECB as sort of one of the announcers that goes around and works at the T20 Blast matches. And I do finals day at Edgbaston as well. Yeah, so it has been I've been very lucky with sort of opportunities I've had. And I think it's quite a small world, event presentation. There's sort of 4 or 5 leading companies in this country who organise most of the top event presentation across most of the top sports. And if you do a good job, then they'll remember you and they'll like to use you. And as long as you can prove you're interested, and I wouldn't really try any sport that I didn't feel comfortable in knowing, because I think you can quite easily get exposed doing things that you don't understand. Because one line can actually undo you completely. If you say something that clearly is not in that sport's maybe terminology or, it's not in the right context, you can easily sort of devalue or discredit yourself. So I personally don't like working in sports that I don't have a genuine interest in or knowledge of. So as you say, football, cricket, rugby, athletics, they would be my top 4 really in terms of where I'm able to work. And luckily a couple of those are winter and a couple of those are summer, which helps to fill the calendar year as well.
Oh, nice. I mean, is there a difference between different events? Do you find yourself sort of changing your tone or like is the audience slightly different?
Yeah, very much. And that's a really good point. I mean, for example, in cricket, I work at Lords as one of the announcers at Lords for the MCC. And also I work at T20 Finals Day. Now that's the same sport, but it's completely different ends of the spectrum. T20 Finals Day is all fun and brash and Lords is all very serious. And I know they're trying to freshen it up a little bit now, but it's completely the other end of the spectrum. So you do very much have to adapt your tone and your delivery, and also in terms of what happens in the game as well, because there's no point in being excited if things are going badly, because you're not going to kid anybody. You're not going to make anybody feel that, England are, they're 3-0 down, they've just scored a consolation. There's no point in the 90th minute. There's no point in going off the charts celebrating that goal, because actually the mood of the stadium won't be that England are going to come back. So you sort of would. And in fact, I did it this week. Now I'm thinking about it. I did it with Brentford scoring a late consolation against Fulham. It was in the 90 plus or 120 plus, whatever Brentford scored. And I didn't go as loud on their goal as I did on Fulham's because of the context of the situation was, A, it was an empty stadium, but B, it wasn't a moment where Brentford were going to come back into the game. It wasn't a huge celebration. They picked up the ball as soon as they could and they ran back to the halfway line. And that moment I had to change my delivery on the spot because it just didn't feel like you should go big there, because it wasn't really a celebration. They were about to lose the game. So every sport is completely different demands. I would say athletics is probably the hardest because as a stadium announcer in athletics, you are also a commentator. So as well as delivering all the kind of usual announcement kind of stuff you'd expect in other sports, you're actually commentating on races, you're commentating on field events. There are usually 2 of you, and you're bouncing. You have a set number of events each. You're bouncing between events. So, for example, my colleague might do the 100-metre heats while I'm looking at the high jump. So we're sort of bouncing off each other. The director will say, right, we're going back to the 3rd round of the discus. So you've got to fiddle about with your computer while you're speaking on the PA to find out what the latest standings are in the discus. Then they say, right, we're going to introduce heat 4 of the 200 metres. So you've got to look down and find your bit of paper that's got the 200 metres start list on it. So athletics is certainly, you come out of every session feeling like your brain is going to explode because, again, there's somebody in your ear telling you where to go and all of this stuff on top of actually delivering the words that you're there to deliver, as well as being organised and being calm under pressure and everything else. So I really enjoy the challenge of athletics. It's a sport that I have a big interest in, but that I would say is a completely different demand to some of the others that I work in.
Yeah, wow, that's an eye opener for me. I didn't realise that you were commentating as well.
Yeah.
What's the strangest event you may have announced out? I know you just said that perhaps you don't go for the ones that you don't know so much about, but maybe the strangest environment.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, I haven't done that many that I would call sort of strange. I mean, there's obviously things that have happened that, I mean, even, Aubameyang dropping the FA Cup this week will go into my list of sort of strange events, because things that you can't prepare for. I haven't really done, because I didn't really do the sort of apprenticeship, if you like. I went sort of straight into announcing at Hampshire's Ageas Bowl, doing T20 matches. That was really my first experience of being an announcer. So I didn't really do the sort of lower level, smaller, the way that a lot of people start doing announcing, maybe announcing at, I don't know, a sports day or a county championships or something like that. I sort of missed all of that out, really. And that comes back to the fact I've worked for the BBC for nearly 20 years. So I sort of have had a broadcasting background, which has sort of surfed me into announcing, if you like. But I would say one of the things that, in terms of things you couldn't be prepared for, was at the Olympic Games in Rio, the medal presentation to Fiji, who had never won a gold medal in any sport. They're all lined up on the top of the podium, and Princess Anne is handing out the medals. And every single person, as they get their medal in rugby, you name them. So you'd say, the Fijian player, 1, 2, 3, you go through the list as they get in their medals. Anyway, we have this list printed out, given to us with the names on. That's the order in which they're all stood on the podium. Someone in a very important ceremonies department somewhere in the Olympics has signed it off. And that's their specific job, is to run the ceremony. They've signed this list to say it's accurate. All the people are there. Anyway, we're going along the line, and I've got the TV monitor in front of me, which is showing each player, so I know when to be speaking, basically. Anyway, we're just about to come along to the star of the tournament for them, who missed the final through injury, and his name was next on my list, but he wasn't. As the camera panned along, I knew the next person on the podium wasn't this guy that was the next one on the list. So this is the Olympic Games gold medal ceremony being, beamed to millions around the world. And it was the first medal ceremony of rugby as well. So we were really everyone was on edge anyway. And I basically took the flyer at the time to jump over this guy's name, because I was so sure that wasn't him. And there's a lot of sort of complicated names in, the Fiji team. They're not called John Smith. They're all called, various multisyllabic names. So I just took the flyer, and my heart was absolutely beating through my chest, hoping that it was right, because of course we're about 3 from the end of the line. I had 3 more names left, and I was just hoping there were 3 more people. And sure enough, I was right. The ceremonies person was wrong. He wasn't there. And it was, that was probably the most nerve-wracking 30 seconds of my announcing career, where I might have just basically missed out someone's Olympic gold medal. But sometimes you just get a feeling. You just get a feeling that you need to do the right thing. I wouldn't usually take a flyer. I'm quite safe as an individual, but that time I had to. And that's one of the things I always look back at and say, my goodness me, why did I actually do that? Because that could have gone really badly wrong. So I mean, to answer your original question, I haven't really got any strange events that I've announced. That I mean, you obviously do, some of the precursors sometimes, a relay race between mascots, and the mascot race at cricket finals day, and all those kind of things are all a bit wacky. But nothing massively strange, I would say.
No. Well, I mean, that Fiji story there, I take my hat off to you. Well done there for going in on that one. Well, I mean, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, and I'm sure you're itching to get back to Wembley, as we all are, but in a supporters capacity to have us all there, because I'm sure there is a noticeable difference for yourself when there's supporters there and when there isn't.
Absolutely. I mean, I do feel like I've sort of lived at Wembley, actually, whereas nobody else has been able to for the last month, because obviously having done the semi-finals and the final of the FA Cup, and then having done the 3 playoff finals as well. So I've actually been there quite a bit myself, and it has been a very strange and a surreal, empty experience, really. I mean, Wembley, the bigger the stadium, the stranger it is, really, because it is so cavernous. They've also got this brand new PA system in, which I don't think you've had a chance to listen to yet, for this year. So that has been even more booming around the empty seats, I can tell you. But hopefully, I mean, who knows which way it's going to go at the moment. But by the time we get to the Wales game, we might know more. And then obviously the home games after that, Belgium and Denmark, it will be amazing, because there's having done an FA Cup final now with a full house and an empty house, just the polar opposite differences between the two. And still, I go back to my most memorable England moment so far, which is the Harry Kane late winner against Croatia in that game. That was my favourite goal announcement I've done so far, because the roof came off in that moment. So
didn't it just? Yes. Yeah. Well, no, thank you very much. And you're on Twitter, aren't you? For people that may want to just see a little bit more of how your life goes, aren't you?
Yes, I spell my name a slightly funny way. I'm not sure what my mum was up to. I'm Kris with a K, so Kris Temple, Temple.
And so, just what's up next for you?
So next, I've actually got a couple of weeks off at the moment because now that football's done, one of my day jobs is I work for the BBC covering Bournemouth matches for BBC Radio up and down the country. So it's been a difficult few weeks with them getting relegated. So I'll be back to them in the Championship at the end of or the start of September. So my actual next football match will be the Community Shield, which is obviously the week before the first round of England matches. So that is my next date in the football diary. I've got other bits and pieces before then, but in terms of getting back on the stadium, Mike, it will be back at Wembley for the Community Shield.
Oh, well, I wish you all the best for that one, and thank you very much, and hope to hear your tones very soon again at a Wembley game.
Pleasure, Russell. Thanks very much for having me on, and keep up the good work with the Three Lions podcast.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for Kris for his time there. As he mentioned, he's on Twitter at Kris Temple, Kris with a K. I found that really interesting. All these little facets that go on around an England game. Hopefully, going forward, we can speak to some more similar people. Thank you, as always, for listening. It is always appreciated. Please do tell your friends or people that you think may find it interesting. Perhaps you know a stadium announcer yourself, one at your local club. Perhaps steps 2, 3, 4 and downwards could well be of interest to them. And if you'd like to get in touch, please find me on all the social channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just search Three Lions Podcast, or you can email threelionspodcast@gmail.com. And I hope you can join me on the next episode, where I hope to be previewing those games we have against Iceland and Denmark. But look after yourselves, stay safe, stay subscribed, wear a mask. Cheers.